Hi, y'all. Welcome back. This is lecture 3 now of the Cold War. So we've done one on the beginnings of the Cold War after World War II, how it gets started, our new enemy, the Soviet Union, how we are fighting them, but not directly, and how the the spread of communism involves us in Korea, in the Korean Peninsula, in the Korean War. That was number 2. So 1, 2. This is 3. This is on the arms race. Arms race. So arms are like firearms, weapons. When we talk arms race, we're really talking the collection of huge stockpiles of weapons, aka nuclear weapons, which is going to happen during the Cold War. Because as we saw at the end of World War II, we developed the atomic bomb. We are the most powerful. We are the most supreme. We have this huge weapon, this huge bomb that can destroy cities, level them in a second. Okay. And so what's the Soviet Union going to do? Well, they're going to respond and build their own as soon as possible. They're going to steal some of our secrets to do that. And so that happens. And so we're going to quickly create this equilibrium where we have these nukes and then the Soviet Union has nukes. But that's not good enough. Let's go ahead and make even bigger nukes. And then who follows the Soviet Union? And then here comes China too. They want to protect themselves. Really, to have nuclear weapons means that you are protected from an invasion, protected from a war, potentially. And so it's going to act as what's called a deterrent to deter other countries from attacking you because you have nukes that you will use against them. So this really becomes most of the Cold War, this stalemate between America. We're having nukes, the Soviet Union, they have nukes. We know that if we attack one another, we're going to use the nukes. So essentially, that means we don't ever use the nukes. This policy becomes known as MAD, or mutually assured destruction. We're going to destroy each other and the world over many times if we use nukes. So let's just keep them in the back. Let's keep them in the missile silos on the airplanes that are flying. And let's see, on the submarines where they are at too. That's called the nuclear triad. The 3 places that the US is going to gain capability to launch nuclear weapons from. Again, submarines, which are going to be powered by nuclear energy as well. We have missiles like intercontinental ballistic missiles we could launch anywhere in the US at the Soviet Union, and then airplanes as well, which can be in the sky at a moment's notice, ready to launch nukes from as well. We still have most of that nuclear triad operational, although it's not on high alert like it was during the Cold War. But let's get started on our lecture. Thanks for joining. I'll try to make this as quick as possible and painless as possible, but I think you'll find it's a pretty interesting topic. And even involves us here locally. The base on 228th on Nike Hill. Supposedly the name Nike comes from the missile, intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, that was based on the base on top that supposedly is a missile silo. There's allegations of it. I've never seen it for myself. That's what other people have told me. Is that's what it is. Now it's FEMA. It's the FEMA headquarters for our region. So technically we're not using it as an active missile silo. Don't know if one that is there or not though. But so the arms race is central to the Cold War. Again, this idea that if you have more nukes, you have more power. So it's a constant race to really make not just one nuke, but you want 100, and not just 100, but thousands. So to the point where really we're going to have thousands of nuclear weapons when really we probably only need 100 to eradicate the world, especially when we make the H bomb, which first gets tested in 1952. We have a new sort of, instead of it's a fission process, a fusion process that's going to sort of create a catastrophic energy effect, which is going to blow up, explode even more area. And they're going to be hundreds and thousands of times more powerful than the bombs that we drop on Japan and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we can make these bombs smaller than Hiroshima, but thousands of times more powerful. So the kiloton bombs, like we drop on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, are 9. Let's see, I can do it. 9 kilotons, and they live all like a 1 square mile, pretty much radius, all in downtown Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Now we measure, and to this day, we still measure nuclear weapons in terms of megatons, which is 1,000 times more powerful. So if you just have 1 megaton, think about it. It's pretty much really 1,000 times greater than what we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so 1 megaton is just kids play. Okay, our average nukes that we have in our arsenal are about 5 megatons. Okay, the largest test ever done was about 10 megatons. It's called Tsar Bomba, if you want to look it up. It was supposed to be the king bomb. And that's the largest nuclear test ever in the world. It was done in Siberia, in Russia, and the Soviet Union, in the middle of nowhere. And still to this day, you don't really go there. The town that's named for it, that was closest to it, got renamed to Archangel, because it's literally, you got to see a picture, not of heaven, but of hell, with the detonation of the world's largest megaton bomb test ever. So, but the Russians are going to quickly follow us. So 4 years after we develop our first atomic bomb, they do. And then they are going to quickly follow, just like us, developing an H bomb just 1 year later. So we couldn't just be like, yeah, we got the strongest, we got an H bomb. You just got the teeny little puny atom bomb. Well, they developed their H bomb just a year after we do. So we are going to test it. I'll show you pictures of our test of our H bomb, which after we test it, we're like, wow, that's pretty powerful. Let's not really do that very often, because we don't know necessarily what we're going to be vaporizing all the time. And then China's going to follow suit too. So they are the other country that has a H bomb. It's really the 3 of our countries that have H bombs. There's about a dozen total countries that have atomic bombs. Total nuclear weapons. It's a lot easier to make just an atomic bomb, but it's a very difficult process just to make one atomic bomb, which is why most countries of the world, there's 200 plus countries, there's only about a dozen that have nuclear weapons or atomic weapons, just because they're so hard to manufacture. And you look at Iran, and they've desired to develop an atomic bomb for years, decades, and they've been trying. And so there's this agreement with Obama, hey, stop making an atomic bomb for 10 years and we'll start trading with you again. And Iran's like, okay, we'll do that. And now Trump got out of that agreement. And so are they building a nuclear bomb? Yes, no. They have been trying forever to build one, and just shows you how long it really takes to build an atomic weapon. So, but again, you're going to have this peace during the Cold War through what's called a MAD philosophy. It's mutually assured destruction. We're not going to destroy you and launch a nuke at you because you're going to do that to us. We're going to destroy each other and the world over, so let's not even mess with the atomic bombs, which is true. And so here's the Castle Bravo test. This was supposed to be, if I remember right, it was only supposed to be a 2 or 3 megaton. You can look it up, but it ended up expanding into a 5 megaton test. So it wasn't supposed to be as big as it was, but it ended up being phenomenally bigger than it was supposed to be. So we're harnessing this nuclear energy, but we really can't control it. And so this is really going to freak people out. This is taken by a nearby island. This was done, I believe, in the Marshall or Solomon Islands. And it's watching it, and there's going to be this huge flood of concussion from the blast that comes all the way out here. I know you're looking at it, and you're like, how far away is that? It's about 10 miles that you're looking way out there, and zoomed in specifically on the spot of the test. So you can see what happens about 10 miles away, just all this flood of water going up into this mushroom cloud. It's really going to vaporize the water, vaporize anything above land. And when we put a bunch of old World War II ships there to see what happens to them, some of them capsize and turn over, and some of them undamaged. But we're going to realize, holy smokes, hydrogen power. We got something incredibly powerful here, that if, let's say, we had a regular atomic bomb, like one dropped on Japan, dropped in Seattle, again, 1 square mile here in Bothell, we would be fine. We might have some radiation, people develop cancer, things like that. We might have windows blown out, but really no damage here in Bothell. If there was an H bomb, like a 5 megaton, 10 megaton, it would not only vaporize all of Seattle, it would vaporize us. We're about 10 miles away. All the way up to Arlington, really, to the south, and probably down to definitely Tacoma, probably farther south than that, and then going east, probably to the mountains. So you're talking a huge square mile of devastation, just vaporized and gone, and the whole state would be affected. There'd be radiation fallout all over. People would die within, days or weeks of intake and radiation, and maybe 3rd-degree burns. Literally, if you were in Arlington still, and you might survive the blast, if you saw the blast happen, your eyes would burn to the point where you would go blind. So we're talking utter devastation, which is why we don't ever want to see these things used, and why people around the world are saying, hey, my sole mission is to make sure that we don't continue to make nuclear weapons and we actually destroy them and retire them. It's called non-proliferation. We don't want nuclear weapons to proliferate and continue to expand in the world. And here's that same test now looking up, and it just continues to go into the atmosphere. And scientists believed it opened up the ozone a little bit, let in some radiation while some radiation is going out. So crazy effects from this test. And again, it's not the biggest test. Russia is going to do that. And so we see depictions. Here's an infrared image of that same test looking up in the atmosphere. And then here's like an artist sort of recreation of what he feel like he saw from an airplane that was flying around. And so this creates kind of mass hysteria, kind of like the COVID virus. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get a disease and die. Well, it's like, oh my gosh, Russia's going to launch a nuke and I'm not going to know. It's just going to fall and boom, on the spot within a second, I'm going to be vaporized and done for. Okay, so huge fear, and I'll talk more about that in a second. So here's all the countries that have nukes. We're in the green. Russia, China, and then India and Pakistan. In this map in 2005, they're trying to develop, they do develop nuclear weapons. North Korea has two. And then some other countries have like chemical weapons. So that's why you're seeing this. But UK has nukes, France has nukes, and then Israel supposedly has them through us to protect themselves, but they've never confirmed. Of course, they don't want to confirm. And Saudi Arabia, they kind of bluff like they do, but we don't really know. And then Iran's been trying to develop them as well, but we're pretty certain that they don't have nuclear capability yet. So, and then another devastating effect of this nuclear part is just the fallout, what's called the radiation. So if you survive the blast, like this house, so again, these are the tests done in the 1940s, and there's going to be more in the 1950s. So this is about a mile from this blast. So you might survive the blast like this house kind of did, I guess, but you can see the concussion is going to knock it off. And then sort of the area that sees the blast is basically burned off. So imagine if that was your body, and you just, the whole front of you could be 3rd-degree burns, the worst burn that you get, you'd be blind. But then the other thing is you ingest all this fallout, this radiation, which, it changes your body's composition down to the molecular level, and introduces things like cancer, which comes and attacks your body easily because it's not functioning correctly. Like your body would still be there if you're burned or blind or whatnot, but literally things like cancer is going to come if you absorb too much. And that's the problem with fallout. You can't hear it. You can't say, oh, there's fallout. I can hear it. You can't taste it. It doesn't taste anything. You can't touch it. Can't smell it. Often you can't even see it. Like really, you can never see it. And so this is another fear too. And that's something about all these nuclear tests that have happened. There's still just a skosh of radiation throughout the atmosphere from those nuclear tests. And there's always an element of different elements, right? That's in our bodies that we can never get rid of. That is always a byproduct of living. So that makes Americans have to plan. What are we going to do? Oh my gosh, if there's a nuclear blast, I want to survive the blast and survive the radiation, which might take weeks, months, maybe years to pass. And so, yeah, if you're driving, that's obviously not the best place. If you could get in a ditch, maybe you're protected from the blast. Maybe your house would be protected, maybe not. So if you have a basement shelter, that's even more protection. But the best, obviously, is an underground shelter with 3 feet of earth above it will give you almost complete protection if it is equipped with a door with the air filter. So now you're really getting serious if you're making an underground sort of bunker to protect yourself from a nuclear attack. So, and here's government printouts. What's that? Okay, just get away from any nuclear attacks and don't be close. So where the arms race goes and developing more and more nukes develops into what's called the space race, because as we're like, okay, let's make rockets to launch these nuclear weapons with, these nuclear warheads. That's a great idea. Well, you got to launch them into low Earth orbit already. So why don't we just keep going to space? And then Oh man, there's the moon. Can we get there with these rockets we're making to launch nukes? Yeah, why don't, instead of a nuclear warhead, let's just put a man in there and see how far we can put a man into space. And so that evolved into the space race in October 1957 when the Russians launched the first satellite. It's called Sputnik. It's about a basketball shaped thing with four antennas that just beeps, beep, beep, beep. That's all it did. It was only in space for like a day and a half, but you could see it. Americans could see it as it passed over. You're seeing this thing with which the sun or the moon's light is reflecting off of it, and you're like, oh, there's the Russians. They're right there. And so the Soviet Union, our enemy, they put something there. What do they have on it? So then it became this great fear of, oh my gosh, we're putting satellites into space. Can the Russians attack us that way and we won't know it? They already have stuff in space that they might be watching us, so that throws America into sort of a chaos, really, and shattered our confidence. Here we are saying that we're the best, we're the strongest, we're the smartest, but the Russians are beating us. The Soviet Union's beating us. They're making these rockets, pushing things into space. And it's not just going to be the satellite Sputnik. They're also going to put the first the first dog, which his name is Laika, and then eventually the first astronaut is going to be in space. And so they call themselves the cosmonauts, though, and they're going to have the first spacewalk. So they're literally going to have someone tethered to a satellite, and he just goes kind of off the tether. Not really. No, he's attached to the spacecraft, of course, and makes it back. So again, that's going to make America look really bad, and we're going to get super fearful of it. And that's when Kennedy says in 1961, I challenge you to go to the moon. So he makes this great challenge that by the end of the decade, America is going to place a man on the moon, which we do. Now, Kennedy's not around to see it because he's assassinated in 1963, but we make good on his promise. And in 1969, America, with the Apollo 11 mission, does walk on the moon. Neil Armstrong, that gentleman that did so, just passed away. And there's been some good movies in the last couple of years made about him and made about what happened in the 60s getting to the moon. Okay, so does Russia get to the moon? No, they just kind of give up and scrap their plans, which is kind of interesting as well. So they were the first to space and had many firsts in space. And then we go to the moon and it's kind of just like, okay. And then we launch a space shuttle, which has now been retired in the last couple of years to do experiments. We have space stations, and we've actually worked with not the Soviet Union, but with the Russians after the Soviet Union collapses to do more things in space and work together. And we've worked together with other countries too. So here's some pictures. Here's Yuri Gagarin. He's the first cosmonaut, astronaut ever in space. He's the first person in space. Okay, and so here's kind of America. This is our Eagle lander in a space capsule that get our astronauts into space. Here's the Russian version as they're trying to get to the moon. And then here's, I believe this is the Saturn V, the rocket that gets our men into space. But America becomes the first on the moon. There's some great photographs that you can look at. Our astronauts go to the moon, plant a flag, they play golf and drive a little space rover all over, moon rover. So sounds like a pretty good life on the moon. And now, like, America's done. But what's interesting, this is a picture about the Chinese. The Chinese are determined to go to the moon by the end of the 2020s here. And it's reignited like another semi-space race because we don't know what the Chinese are going to do. They're communists too, just like the Soviet Union was. What are they going to do on the moon? So, and we have other private companies now. It's not NASA going into space, SpaceX, and Blue Ocean, and other space companies that are there trying to get space tourists into space. They're launching satellites constantly. And so NASA has now had kind of a smaller role than it ever has. And that's kind of has happened since Obama's presidency and in Trump's presidency, just kind of a minimized importance. But now there's talk about sort of reviving efforts to get back to space and get to the moon and then get to Mars and start to colonize. That's something, if you've seen a lot of Mars movies, like with Matt Damon, what's that one? The Martian, for instance. So a lot of interest in movies coming out lately about space travel too. So Also, what happens in the 1950s, we start to see this be really the best decade to be an American in American history while the Cold War is going on. This is the presidential electoral college map of Eisenhower. He is going against someone from Illinois named Adlai Stevenson, who is the Democrat. Eisenhower is a Republican. And again, he's coming off being a war hero from World War II. He didn't involve himself in the Korean War. He was retired, but then decides he's going to run for president in 1952, wins the Republican ticket in a landslide, and then wins the election pretty much in a landslide. And you can see this electoral map just basically based off being a war hero, has very minimal political experience, but obviously very experienced in leading people in military, leading people in combat. And he's regarded as one of America's best presidents, especially in the last 100 years, just because of the tremendous peace we're going to have in his presidency, as well as prosperity. People are going to go out and work and find jobs, go to college for the first time, and we'll talk about kind of those reasons why. But Eisenhower gets elected not just in 1952, but he's going to get reelected to a second term in 1956. By this point, we have a constitutional amendment that says presidents can not get elected more than twice. So FDR, he gets elected for the last time in 1944, dies the next year in 45. In I believe it was 52 is when the constitutional amendment gets passed. So there's no president. Eisenhower probably could have got elected again in 1960, but via the Constitution, he could not run again. And he really had no interest to do so then either. So, but we're going to see under his presidency, tremendous U.S. growth and power and prosperity throughout the world, especially because we are like one of the few last two surviving superpowers that survived World War II with the Soviet Union and Great Britain, but they have sort of a minor sort of position in the world compared to us. He's going to create NASA as a response to USSR's Sputnik satellite launching, and he's going to increase spending and focus on nuclear weapons, creating the H-bomb, as I mentioned, the Castle Bravo test, and 15 megatons, excuse me. It's supposed to be a 10 megaton bomb. It expanded into 15 megatons. And so it was detonated on Bikini Atoll. And so women or men, if you want to know why women's two-piece swimwear were called bikinis, is because there is a designer that designed the first two-piece swimsuit, and it was pretty hot and racy and radical for the time. And so just like the H-bomb that was detonated on Bikini Atoll and was so hot and racy, for its day, he's like, I'm going to call my two-piece swimsuit a bikini. So that's where the name of that two-piece swimsuit comes from and has stuck ever since. He's also going to create the interstate highway system, which if you're driving on I-5, our interstate system is made and sponsored by Ike, who said we needed a fast way to transport our military throughout the country during the Cold War in case of emergencies or crises. And so that's how we start building the interstate highway system. Okay, last couple slides. So the culture of the 1950s is kind of like the heyday. It's the wonder years, the golden years of American history. Anyone really raised in the 1950s really has fond memories. It seems to be great for many, not for all, but for many. And why is that? Well, as World War II is over, the veterans come home. Unlike World War I, where the government's like, okay, we're going to promise to give you some money, but we're going to invest it on your behalf. So when you retire, this becomes your pension. After World War II is over, we corrected that. And Truman passed what was called the GI Bill with Congress that just said, hey, you fought and served for our country. If you served our country, we're going to give you a free college education. And that deal is still out there. If you join the military for, I can't remember, 4, 5, 6 years, then you still get free college. You get college paid for as a consequence for your service. And not only that, but they're going to give you low mortgage rates called VA loans from the Veterans Administration. They're going to give you small business loans. So there's government incentives that start in the 1950s and is given to military veterans of World War II. And now any military veteran in American history can qualify for those as well, which brings tremendous prosperity because we had millions of Americans that participated in World War II. And so millions of Americans are going to be going to college because they're going to have their college paid for. And so we see college campuses boom in the 1950s and 1960s too. And what happens? All these soldiers come back too after World War II. They haven't seen their wives or they haven't seen ladies for a long time. So they're getting married and then making babies. This is going to be a generation of Americans that's called baby boomers. Maybe you've heard that. So if anyone was born, maybe this is your grandparents between 1946 and 1960. They are called baby boomers. They're of the baby boom generation. This is going to be the largest population of people made in American history, is called the baby boomer. And they're all now retired and getting older. And so that's why if you're being a nurse or a doctor, you're going to have some good job security for the next 20 years, because their baby boomers are about in their 60s and more are retiring and getting elderly. And they're even older than that too. So, but World War veterans return, married, started families. They now have education. They're getting better jobs and producing record numbers of babies. When you have lots of stability in your life, you like to create families. And then also people want houses. It's going to be very difficult to find houses and space in cities. So these cities start expanding into what we call suburbs, so areas outside of cities. And now people have transportation via the interstate system, and roads and cars are going to become more affordable too, and people can afford them. And so suburbs are really going to explode. That's how Bothell really starts taking off population wise. We were kind of just a sleepy logging town, just connected along Lake Washington to Kenmore and then down into Seattle. But it becomes a destination for people that don't want to live in the city. You can take 522 around the north of Lake Washington and come to your home of Bothell, and becomes a really nice, quaint community, right? But now is continuing to expand as people are still moving out of the cities and wanting to live here because it's a great place. So, but the increase of cars is causing an increase of traffic, and we need even more freeways, and Eisenhower helped to create those. So my last slide is just a comment on the culture of the 1950s during this golden age. President Ike, very famous for his day, still very well regarded as a president of the United States, for bringing a lot of this stability and prosperity to America. We're going to see an explosion in jazz music, which wasn't invented. Remember, it came out in the 1920s, going to be very popular, many big bands. And we're going to see really multiracial artists, especially in jazz. There's going to be a lot of different artists. I'm thinking of Duke Ellington is still going to be popular in the 1950s in his big band. And there's going to be the crooners come out, like Frank Sinatra, those gentlemen with the deep, great voices. And then rock and roll is going to be invented in the 1950s, catapulted by Elvis Presley. We're also going to see the golden age of television, where a lot of families are able to afford TVs. Here's kind of what it looked like, just a small screen, black and white, and they're going to crowd around the TV and see some great TV shows in black and white, Westerns and all of that. So it became the new medium for how you got your information, how you were entertained, and it really eclipses the radio, which was still popular, but kind of wanes in popularity to the TV. But still, we're going to have increased discrimination. Still going to be a segregated society, not just in the South, especially in the South, but all over the country as well. And so there's going to be actions that begin in the 1950s that really lead us into what's called the Civil Rights Movement and the eradication of segregation laws throughout America to create equality throughout this land. Okay, so this is where we'll end. Next lecture will be on Joseph McCarthy and him trying to root out communists, as well as the government trying to root out communists in government in American life. All right, thanks for joining. A little less than a half hour, that's good. Messner's doing better. All right, thanks for taking notes.